And so this has been helpful in that regard.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'm new to this whole realm, this side of the business, period. So most of all of my corporate experience was working either in the marketing, sales, or product management side of the business. And so as I caught this leadership development bug and then began pitching and putting myself out there, everyone who was hiring me to come in and do work for them was either in HR or DEI. So I was like,
Mhm.
maybe I should join organizations that are more like aligned. So I like you said, being able to articulate even what I do, why, and how it could be supportive has been a journey for me. So I can relate to you on that. Just knowing I'm passionate about this, I have
Yeah.
what it takes, but then being able to then describe it in a way that resonates has been,
Mhm.
just a challenge and one that I'm, geared up to continue to do.
So are you in an L&D role now, or are you
No, I work as a consultant, so organizations
okay,
begin to coach, and I am doing instructional design, and so I've put together and facilitated myself as an outside contractor or facilitator, speaker and trainer that comes in to do this kind of work, but I haven't worked within an organization in that direct
okay,
role. So,
okay. Well, if you need an executive coach, I'm also certified as an executive
thank
coach. I
you.
have my own business.
Oh, excellent. What's the name of your business?
Zayas Roman Consulting.
Okay,
I'll
I'm
put it in
gonna.
the chat. Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
one.
I just
I
put it.
definitely, um, I definitely felt like what Orlando was talking about when you talk about you don't necessarily know the lingo,
Yeah.
right? But you're like, I know what I'm doing. I just don't.
Yes.
I don't know how to say it.
I have a different education background, right? Um,
Yes.
so it's like what they're describing. A lot of what I'm learning now, like, oh, okay. When I'm teaching classes or I'm coach, like, oh, I'm doing this one-on-one private
Yes.
session. It's considered a coaching session. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Like,
Oh,
oh,
that's what that is.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm looking at, oh, okay, when you move this way, you drag your leg a little bit. Oh, that's performance improvement or performance.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
like, yeah. Oh, okay, I look at your videos and I'm saying, oh, you need to work on this. Oh, that's a needs analysis. Like, okay, oh,
Oh
okay.
yes. Oh, that's good.
I'm learning like, the fundamentals.
So
I
how
think
are you learning those, Nicholas?
part of it is Jonathan's helping a lot, right? So like
Okay.
as we talk about things, so him having a musical background helps a lot because
Mm.
a lot of the concepts transfer, right?
Mhm.
So like I might not know the same degree of technical music knowledge, and he might not know the same degree of technical dance knowledge, but a lot of the things, the same uh principles apply, right?
Yeah.
But when I'll describe something, he's like, oh, okay. In music, we call that this, but then in the L&D field, it would be called this instead, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
That really paints such a great picture. I love that. From like a
So
whole
Nicholas, can you put together like a cheat sheet of all these like vocabulary you're learning and what the definition is, and then we can like borrow it?
I think
like a
that's a good
glossary of
idea.
sorts. Mhm.
I'll have to look into that's a good idea.
Does the program start at 6? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're 1 minute away.
I was thinking of going in person, like Kashan said, but it said I would get there at like 5:56. I'm like, oh, I think I'm just gonna call in from home.
And Gloriana, where do you work?
I have my own consulting and coaching firm too, Lena.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So if you need executive coach.
Yeah, I don't do my focus is mid-level management. So yeah, that would be it's always good to know what niche people have for their coaching.
So
Yes.
what's your niche?
So mid-level managers that have a technical background.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's similar to some of the groups that I've supported and that I have
Oh,
good success with.
oh,
I've worked with a lot of like engineers. In my past, I've worked with like like program managers, engineers,
yeah.
IT
Those are my
folks.
people. High
Yeah.
C's on the disc. They like my
Yep.
coaching style.
Yep. Yep.
Hey, 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 checking in, y'all. Can you hear
Hello.
us okay?
Everything is
Yes, we
great.
can.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. This is our first time using the owl, so hopefully it works well to create as best of a virtual hybrid experience as can be, but know that y'all are absolutely missed in the room. Okay. So let's do this. I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. And if someone online can give me a heads up that you can see it, then we will get started.
Yes. You can see the
You
screen.
can see the screen? Phenomenal. All right, it's a minute after the hour, so we can go ahead and get started. I appreciate y'all for bearing with traffic and all the things. I don't know how it was for you all this morning, but traffic was horrendous this morning for whatever reason, depending on where you're going. I think Daphne, you had a similar experience. Coming here, okay, so you know the challenge, but it's Atlanta. But either way, glad y'all are here, and welcome to those obviously also online. Figured we could start just real quick with a round robin. I love to get a feel for obviously who's in the room and online. And then if you would, introduce yourself with name and a word for the day, whatever that word is that describes your day. This is a safe space, but I stole this question from, or borrowed rather, this question from someone a while back, and you'd be surprised what you hear in terms of how people might describe their day. So I'll start, we can go around the room and then we can go online. So Josiah Owens, as far as affiliation with the chapter VP of programming, my word of the day is fire hose. Fire hose, because I started a new role yesterday and have literally been drinking from the tap of the fire hose with every acronym probably known to the nuclear industry, having not come from the nuclear industry, but it's fun. But yeah, fire hose would be my word of the day. So we'll go Nicole and snake around the room.
All right, hello everyone in person and online. I'm Nicole Dixon. I'm president of the Atlanta chapter. I must say it's the largest chapter in the country, and I'm very proud of our executive board and our board of directors. My word of the day would be racing. So I don't know how much you all watched the Belmont race this weekend. I think it was the Belmont race that came on Saturday, where they load the horses up into the stall and then they just open it and ding, they go around and it starts racing. That's what Monday at 8 a.m. is like for me. I feel like I'm loaded into this carousel in front of my computer, and then 8 o'clock hits and it doesn't stop until Friday at 5 o'clock. So that would be my word of the day.
Bless your heart. I understand. Kelly?
All right, hi everyone, I'm Kelly Tracy. I'm Vice President for Technology for the Greater Atlanta chapter. I'm not sure if my day has a particular word today, but my word for the last couple of weeks is probably pivot. Kind of where I am professionally right now.
It's Michael Sanford, the VP of Strategic Partnerships for the Greater Atlanta chapter. And my word of the day would be chemistry. And working on getting chemistry balanced in my pool hall. Not having much luck.
Hi, my name is Gary Cassis. My word of the day is excited. I'm excited to be here. New to the organization, read up on it. Really excited about meeting the folks here and connecting and networking. So yeah.
Quick round of applause and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Amber Wright, and my word of the day is calm. I'm grateful for that. And this is my first ever interaction with this organization in my life, so happy to be here.
Another round of applause.
I'm Jill Forrest. I'll say, I finally wonder, I wonder how it's June. I'm still kind of thinking that it's May, even though I know it's not. So I feel like I'm trying to catch up. Like everything's just running ahead of me, so. I'm an ATP member and I haven't been here in 2 months, so I'm able to do that now, so.
Hello, I'm Renato Martinez, and I work for Emory Continuing Education. We work here in this building. We're up on the 3rd floor, but it gives us use of this wonderful room here as well. Word of the day for me would be challenge, or I would say just slightly challenged. My work computer was re-imaged recently, so the printer now does not want to work for me. The printer upstairs will acknowledge that I'm sending something, but it then doesn't print it. So either I figure it out tonight or I wait for IT tomorrow. But I was trying to print some things today. Of course.
Hello, everyone. I am Daphne Evans. I am affiliated with the Greater Atlanta chapter of ATD, the greatest chapter of all. I am the VP of Community Relations, and glad to be here today. My word for today would be gratitude. It's a lot of things that are going on in my life, my household, and so through it all, I am very grateful.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Ballard. My word for today is probably determined. I have a list of things I got to do after I leave here. I'm a full-time PhD student at KSU, and I don't work while I'm doing that right now. And hence why my word for today is determined, because I have a list of things I have to turn in by tomorrow. But I am happy to be here. I am a part of the membership committee. So if you're a new member, you probably see my face when I do the new member orientations. I'm the director of organizational membership, and I'm definitely happy to be here. Sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the sacrifice.
I have a stick.
Let's go online. Let's start with Kishan.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Keyshawn Hughes. I'm a neuro leadership-based consultant and coach. My company is Neurosavvy Leadership. And my word of the day is positive. So I plan to be there in person, but my husband's away on work. I'm managing my child and dinner. So I pivoted. I like that word pivot too, towards the positive. So I'm here. All my interactions so far have been positive online. And I'm just looking forward to getting some great information to keep this positive train going. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go, Gloriana. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name's Gloriana Tay, and I do collaborative leadership coaching and help organizations with talent development. I'm an independent Harrison Assessment Solutions provider, and have some other tools as well that I use to help the people and projects thrive. So that's a little bit about me. And if I can have 2 words, I'm in the middle of writing a blog about auditory exclusion. So that's what's stuck in my head right now. And that's how people sometimes have trouble hearing under stress. It happens more than just in the military. And so, yeah.
Please share when that comes out, because it would explain so much in terms of when I'm trying to do things and my 2-year-old is making noise and I cannot say it. That makes sense. That makes sense. But thank you. Share, Nicholas.
Hey, y'all, my name is Nicholas Sapp. I'm an operations coordinator at Emory University. I manage a team of about 40 student staff, and we just keep being top
Would be
students.
happy to.
And so, yeah, my word of the day is preparation, because I am going to a tech conference tomorrow, and I've just been figuring out my calendar. How we gonna do this thing, so.
Well, good luck and hope you enjoy, sir. Let's go, Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena Roman. I am an executive coach and also looking currently for a new home to land as far as a job. And my word for the day would have to be excited because I'm getting ready to go on vacation starting Thursday. So excited about that.
Well, safe travels and enjoy vacation.
Thank you.
Yep, Pravita.
Good evening. I'm Provita Mungin. I'm Organizational Development Manager, and I am also the VP of Membership. So excited to see Tony and hear what he has to say and has as value to add to us this evening. Hey, Josiah. My word for the day is focus. Being pulled in so many different directions, and it's so easy to think you can multitask, and it's really no such thing. So I had to tell myself all day today, stay focused, complete the task, complete the task.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Welcome. Glad you're here. We'll go Marlo and then Lakeisha. You can round us out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marlo McKay, and I'm a Learning and Development Manager. I work for SCP Health. We are always looking for great talent, so please just go on our website and see if there are any opportunities. But yeah, we're always looking. I would say my word for today is being grateful. I'm going through, I'm trying to juggle some things boy, I'm sorry. Today was a tough day, and sometimes we do have those tough days. We don't plan them, but when they arise, then you have to just kind of move forward and get through it. So I'm just grateful that I was able to kind of, just walk through the storm, and I'm actually on the other end of it. So I'm grateful for that.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. All right, Lakeisha.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for not being on camera today or tonight. However, you can be assured that this smile that you see on my photo is the same smile on my face right in this moment, okay? I am Lakeisha Orr. I am a volunteer on the programming committee and the marketing committee. And my word for today is presence. Because like Pravita, with the focus and being pulled in many directions, I just have to remind myself to be present in this moment. So I am glad to be here today virtually and be present.
Glad you're here as well. We appreciate y'all for participating. I think we can all agree to a certain extent that we are all juggling a lot. But the fact that y'all showed up, that you're here, know that you're sane, but also that it must mean that we're really passionate about the things that we're doing. To be in school, to be sacrificing, to be stretching ourselves in different ways. So that is kudos to all of you in the room and online for all that you're doing. So shout out to y'all. With that, I do want to let Daphne give an audible. Each month we started to incorporate, or each chapter meeting rather, we've started to incorporate what we call DEI moments. And so she's gonna present on this month's DEI moment. Daphne?
Here, up there.
You can stay there. I'll flip the slide for you. Boom.
Well, hello, everyone. This is our DEI moment. And so June is Pride Month. And one of the themes that I did find as I was putting this together was the theme in New York for Pride Month is reflect, empower, and unite. And then across the nation, as well as across the world, Pride Month is being celebrated. And some of the other themes that I was able to determine for Atlanta, so hometown, United with Pride is the theme. In DC, it's totally radical. And in LA, Power of Pride. And in San Francisco, the Beacon of Love. And so with all of that, I really felt what New York has, reflect, empower, and unite, encapsulated everything that some of the other cities that they have as their current theme. So celebrating Pride Month is really an opportunity to pause and celebrate the work and the history of the LGBTQ plus community. So there are some historical figures that I think in the last couple of years, like I've heard names, but I didn't really have a face to it. So I think 2023, there was a movie called Rustin. So Rustin was a very integral part of the March on DC. He helped facilitate that whole thing. I saw the movie. If you haven't, it's on Netflix. It's really good. So I should get some kudos from Netflix for
You
this.
should.
For that.
Shout out. We need a sponsorship.
Sponsorship. But he was very instrumental in getting that going. But because of his gender or sexual affiliation or orientation, I should say, they put him to the sidelines. So other people, and then other people, we have, there's a movie called Milk, which is another individual who was he was an American politician. He was the first openly gay political person that was elected into office in California. So that's just a little bit of when we talk about the work and the history. There are a lot of historical figures within our community and within our history that this is an opportunity that the LGBTQ plus, as well as everyone, should take time and recognize. Also, this is an opportunity of being aware of issues that impact the LGBTQ plus community, such as legal rights, rights to marriage, right to gender, and to identify as one would choose to do so. So there's a lot of things that go along. So that's part of the celebration as we look at the themes of reflect, empower, and unite. And then as we look at in the workspace, as we are a professional organization, as we look at in the workplace, how can we continue to celebrate pride? So one of the things that we should all do in any form of fashion is create an inclusive culture. Having things like DEI workshops, such as unbiased consciousness workshops, either you lead them if you feel confident in that, or participate in those to be able to identify what are some of your own biases. We all have biases, and the best thing to do first is to be aware of what those biases are, and then be able to do things to help. I won't say fix, but you identify them, and then you're able to act accordingly. Participate or establish affinity groups. A lot of us that work in corporate organizations, you may have affinity groups, also known as BRGs or ERGs. Business resource, just had a conversation about acronyms, business resource groups or employee resource groups. But participate in those, and not just those that you align with, be an ally. So my next bullet point is here is be an ally. Ask how you can be supportive, ask questions, educate yourself. Don't rely on anyone from any group to educate you. Educate yourself, and then ask yourself questions. Ask questions to find out how you can be supportive, and then how you can gain knowledge and be an ally to whatever group or organization or group of that you're supporting. And then also acknowledge and support pronouns: she, her, him, his, and they, them. And then also things that I work on really hard is use gender neutral language. I'm a facilitator, and I'm real good, I think because I'm from the Midwest, and I'm good for saying you guys, but I'm down here in the South, so I just say y'all. And so I just say y'all, or more importantly, use the individual's name. So with that, that is our DEI moment.
Appreciate you, Daphne. And before we go on to have our illustrious speaker of the evening come up, I want to give Nicole an opportunity. You've got a special presentation for Volunteer of the Month, I believe.
Yes, so this will be very short and quick, but Lakeisha Orr is going to be our Volunteer of the Month. And I'm so excited to announce this because Lakeisha has done such a great job in the chapter. She participates on 2 committees. She's been instrumental on Josiah's programming committee. She's been instrumental on the marketing committee. 2 of the most imperative committees that we have. Lots of work there. So I'm excited to announce you Lakeisha as our volunteer of the month. We'll get you to send your bio and your picture, and we'll put it on our social media and website. So everybody give Lakeisha.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I told you had to be here. But congrats again, Lakeisha. Ditto to everything that Nicole said. So with that, we are very fortunate to have Tony Ballard in the room. If you all would give him a round of applause for being here again with all that he's got going on. But he's going to be talking to us about exploring DE&I in L&D. That's a lot of letters and acronyms. So hopefully you can help us work through that.
Yeah.
But Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Josiah, for the warm introduction. And I definitely want to thank Lakeisha Orr and Nicole Gostin for giving me an opportunity to come be a guest speaker for ATD Greater Atlanta chapter. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought Lakeisha Orr messaged the wrong person when she asked me. I was like, "Are you sure you meant to ask me?" So, but all jokes aside, I'm very happy to be here. This subject is definitely near and dear to me. And before I dive into the slides, I'll tell you a little bit about how all that started through my bio. So if you haven't had a chance to read the announcement with a little bit about me, I was in the Air Force for 22 years. I was promoted to the rank of Chief Master Sergeant, which is the highest enlisted rank that you could go. I stayed for 22 years. I moved to 5 different states. I lived overseas in Japan for 3 years. I deployed 6 times to Kuwait, Afghanistan, Europe, and yeah, that's about it. So when we started talking diversity and inclusion, a lot of my experience in that space started during my tenure in the military. So I'll touch on that a little bit, and I intertwined it with what I did after I left the military. And after I left the military, I went into financial services. So I worked for 2 banks, and I was able to leverage a lot of what I learned in the Air Force to help me get acclimated in the private sector. And I worked directly in diversity and inclusion during my tenure at the Pentagon. I was there for 2 years, and that was an eye-opener. So just in case you don't know, the Air Force umbrella is comprised of nearly 700,000 people. So every time you touch policy, it goes across the entire global enterprise, and that global enterprise is broken into 10 regions. So we have 2 international regions. So we just call it Europe and the Pacific, based like the ocean. So keep it simple. So we do it that way. And then I also got a chance to write policy for 5 years at our headquarters, HR Services Center for 14 programs with a small team. So I worked on a lot of small projects, and I always had to keep in mind the diversity aspects, the neutral language. We had lawyers on standby. They had to review everything that we received from the Pentagon, in which they testify with Congress. So we have a 3-star that essentially testifies for the Air Force benefits, rights and benefits through Congress, and then whatever they agree on, like our National Defense Authorization Act. And since we're talking about DEI, transgender would be one of those topics that they say, hey, here's a new policy on transgender. The Pentagon gets it and hands it over to the personnel center where I work. That's what we call our HR Services Center, is a personnel center. And every program offers a primary responsibility. There's 200 programs in that building that gets touched, just to give you some numbers. And there's around 2,500 people that work in that one building in San Antonio, Texas, that produces policy for 697,000 people around the globe. So we do a lot of briefings, and a lot of what you saw during COVID was working hybrid. We have been doing that my entire career. So, but to see the private sector acknowledge that, hey, we can work remote, that was refreshing for me. But a lot of what I'll talk about today is incorporated into these slides from my experience in the military. And I'll start with my first slide here. This is a picture of an actual training, a leadership training that I went to. So a lot of the leadership training that I went to is typically 5 weeks. So in the private sector, what I learned working in learning and development in the banking industry, it's similar to going through a 6-month mentorship or sponsorship programs, but we actually learn how to train your replacement. So I always had to have a number 2. So when I go to training, someone else is carrying my load for me until I come back. But that person who's carrying my load is always with me when I go to a meeting, when I go on a business trip. So we get a chance to really think alike. And I picked this picture because it reminds me of the fact that we lead people from all walks of life. So we have some individuals in the military that don't even have a US citizenship. So they can only do the first 3 to 4 years until they get their citizenship. So again, we touch on diversity from the moment you get there. And you have some people who haven't left their hometown, and I was one of them. For the first time, and now you're sleeping in, we call it a studio apartment. There's 60 people in the open bay, and you have to get to know them for 6 weeks. And then from there, you build a bond with them, and you have a leadership role. Everybody has a leadership role. And from there, you transition out to like, I call it, it's like getting an HR certification program. That was my technical school. So I went to that in Biloxi, Mississippi. So I got a chance to do some traveling again. To go to school for that. So the way the Air Force sets it up, we have one line of business that's responsible for at least 8 to 10 military bases that do training from how to load airplanes, how to do IT. There's 200 career fields. So, but my career field in HR, I had to learn a little bit about everybody's career field because I'm essentially an advisor. So I started out as a specialist, but you become an advisor over time because you have to learn so much. But I picked this slide because this is essentially the type of training that we do. This is 5 weeks, and it was a lot of trust exercises every week, and it's a build up to a capstone course where we did a staff ride. We basically just got in a van and went to the San Francisco Bay Bridge. And if you've ever been there, there's cannons on that hill from when Pearl Harbor was attacked. And that was essentially why they built those there, because they thought that Japan was going to attack the US. So they were preparing for that. And so we went there to kind of learn a little bit about the history and why we do what we do and do a presentation in teams. And those teams are mixed. So we had 2 individuals from the Caribbean islands. They were our international counterparts that do Coast Guard. So they intertwined them with the Coast Guard invited the Air Force, and you have to get nominated to do that. So I did this at my 14-year mark in the Air Force. I got nominated to go do that. And it was neat to kind of learn what the other services do, like the Navy, the Coast Guard. And again, we're doing some joint training. So here we are again with this DEI, but this picture was taken in 2014, and I still keep in touch with most of the individuals in this picture. So that bond that we build over that 5-week period, they're essentially become family over time. So there's hardly anywhere I can't go at this point after spending 22 years in the Air Force and traveling to at least 14 different places where I've actually laid my head for over 30 days or 3 to 5 years. So again, I wanted to introduce the slides with that to kind of give you a general overview of my background before I dive into the slides. And I want you to feel free to ask whatever questions come to mind. And I didn't want to lecture you on these slides. So what I did was I put it together, and I'll get to it in a minute, but I put it together as if you are wearing my shoes as a diversity, equity, and inclusion development lead, which is a fancy way of saying learning and development consultant in the DEI space. So without further ado, we'll jump into, yes.
Is that the same shot from a different angle?
No, it's 2 pictures.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes and no. It's 2 pictures. That's what it looks like if you're standing at the top looking down.
Okay.
Yeah, there's more people, but the way the image merged, it cut off some of the people. So we have close to 67 people in this training. And we're broken into 8 teams. And it was neat. We can talk more about that. But it was very interesting because you do a lot of rope climbing. Like you literally trust the people that are in your team. So they teach you how to move beyond like your fears, get some confidence, and everything you kind of pay third-party vendors to do when you bring them on to do your mentorship and sponsorship programs. So what I learned in this training is second to none to what I've seen after I left the military. So I've did this type of training for 5 weeks, at least 5 times throughout my 22-year career. So I went to that training every 2 to 3, every time you get promoted. So because I got promoted so fast, every time I got promoted to transition from individual contributor to first line supervisor to a level 2 manager to a senior leader, you go through a 5-week course. So they literally prepare you, which is not something I see that's common in the private sector.
Is that a fall exercise? Like,
This is in
are they
October.
holding up their hand so they can catch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And that's basically what the trust exercise is all about. Yeah. To let go of your fears and trust the people that are on your team to help you get to where you need to be. Yeah. So leadership is not something that you do by yourself, basically. Yeah. So with that, when I transitioned from the military, I retired out of Warner Robins, Georgia, which is one of our largest supply chain bases in the Air Force. So all of the plane parts, they partner with Boeing, Lockheed Martin, those big Fortune 100 companies that do logistics. I retired there and moved to Atlanta. So when I got here, I did everything I learned every time I moved. You want to get immersed into the community, find somewhere to plug in and assist. And that's basically what I did. So someone reached out to me through LinkedIn and asked me to come to a DEI roundtable meeting. And so I ended up at, I forget which side of town I was on, but someone in that meeting introduced me to the DEI Hub, and that's what I want to transition to next. But the DEI Hub, they hosted an international, they hosted a survey to read the results of an international study on the global state of DEI. And they administered this survey to over 160 DEI practitioners with 6 years or more experience in that space. And these were some of the 5 key takeaways. And I got the email to attend this webinar while I was putting these slides together. And I was like, you know what? I need to share this because the highlighted area, I'm not going to read this line by line to you, but the highlighted areas are some themes that came up in the presentation that I had put together. So as soon as Lakeisha and Nicole asked me to come speak, I drafted my slides, and this so happened to pop up on my Slack channel. And I was like, you know what, I need to register for that. And I did, and I'm glad I went. So I got a chance to sit through and listen to one of the panelists who was from England. So we had someone on there for Europe, and I believe the other 2 were from the US. So, and it was neat to kind of hear them talk through each of these 5 predictions and how they landed where they are. And my presentation kind of intertwines with this because a lot of what they were talking about is what I got exposed to working in L&D in the DEI space. So what you see is the progress, as far as progress outside the US, they expect that to increase, especially in IT and technology, IT and finance. And then there's going to be budget cuts. That's always to be expected when companies are restructuring. And then inclusion, especially prediction 3 and 5 kind of go together to me. The talent management in regards to inclusion. There's a study from Korn Ferry where they discovered that there's going to be an $8.3 trillion talent shortage. So if you Google Korn Ferry and $8.3 million talent shortage, you'll see that they're already doing research on it to determine like how to approach that from a talent management perspective. And the biggest takeaway from that is that there's low fertility rates, and then the baby boomers are retiring earlier, like at age 62 versus I'm going to tough this out until I can't go anymore. So they're going to have less people entering the workforce, which is why we have so much emerging technology, hence why we probably have prediction 1. They didn't bring this up in the webinar, just so you know. This is some stuff I found doing research at KSU because I wanted to study career transitions, and that's how I ended up finding this information. But also legal and political challenges. We see that in the news already with Florida and then how they repealed laws in the Supreme Court, some of the controversial laws. And with that, if anyone has any further questions, I will transition to my next slide. But I wanted to warm you up so you can kind of see what's happening behind the scenes. So I have 2 objectives for today. My first objective is just to help you understand the importance of DEI, which I think I hammered that on the first slide. And then my second objective is to share some ways to implement DEI training. And that's where we'll go from here. And so the easiest way for me to do that is I wanted you to picture yourself as a DEI development lead, again, which is a fancy way of saying learning and development consultant in the DEI space. And I will cover 3 main points to kind of help you walk you through what I've done in the past as a DEI development lead. So the first thing we'll do is talk about developing a DEI strategy. And again, I didn't want to lecture you, so I just wanted to share the tools that I use to kind of operate in this space. And then the second part is to operationalize that strategy. So, and they're definitely not one and the same. And then the third part, I'll end with tips like, hey, here's some lessons learned, some things that I learned along the way that I think are important that we kind of overlook. And I will say that's not an all-inclusive list. So, but if time permits, I did have some additional slides that I wanted to kind of share with you. And Daphne mentioned affinity groups. So throughout my slides, I just wanted to give you a pre-warning that I use the term employee resource group and also employee resource network. And then I'm familiar with the term affinity groups, but it's not something that I've seen used where I work. So I just want to put that out there in case you see the slides. You're like, what is an ERG? All right, so the first topic that we'll dive into is developing a DEI strategy. And here's a list of what we'll talk about. And this is just a short list. And so I wanted to give you visuals of what I've done, and it's not all inclusive. So each step feeds into the next, just to warn you. And I'll kind of walk you through, again, I'm just gonna walk you through that scenario as a DEI development lead. So when we start building a DEI development strategy, the first thing we do is a needs assessment, and this is where it starts. So this is not an all-inclusive list, but this is just some general idea on where we start to assess the current state. So when you see climate surveys, they're called different things. So I just use a general term that I'm familiar with, it's the climate surveys, but in the military, we call them DEOCs, which is a Defense Organizational Climate Survey. And then in the banking industry, the term I'm familiar with is Pulse Survey. So in there, some of the things that you'll see in those surveys is training and development, like how the employees feel about training and development, communication, leadership, and intent to stay. Again, I like how military did it better. The way we debriefed ours, we had to literally debrief it to the entire organization. So the last organization I worked for, I was a senior leader for a team of 600 people. So we had our marketing department. I like having those resources at my fingertips, though. But we had a marketing department that helped us build like a poster board to kind of talk through the DEOC so it doesn't get boring. And if you like, I could share a copy of it with you. But some of the things we put on that board is what do you want us to do less of? What do you want us to do more of? And there's some areas of improvement. And then what are some leadership things? And that's how we adjust it. And normally the way that we do it, we try to do that climate assessment within the first year of new leadership, because most of the people taking a survey are taking a survey based on the previous leadership. So it gives us a chance to kind of right size everything before the next leadership comes in. So a lot of work there. And then the next thing was a DEI diagnostic survey. Again, it's similar, but I've seen it outsourced. I've never been with a company who's actually done the DEI diagnostic, because then you, as we mentioned earlier about the unconscious bias, this is one of the ways to navigate around the unconscious bias, especially with the senior leaders, if they've been in those organizations for an extended period of time. It'll be a little bit difficult to implement. I know you do change management, so so it's a little difficult to kind of change things. And again, that change management. Speaking of change management for the shift with the current state, that was part of our curriculum as well, and those 5-week leadership courses. So I still have all that stuff. I'm that hoarder guy with the professional development training. I kept all that. And then exit surveys, self-explanatory. I've seen that done differently. Some people automate it. I've done them where it depends on how big your organization is. So one of the organizations I was a senior advisor for, we had 200 people. So our schedule permitted us to sit with everyone that left. So we actually gave them 30 minutes to an hour to just talk to us. And we kind of walked them through what we could do to help them while they were leaving. But different organization. And then you have LMS assessments with the L1, L2 surveys. I've used those to kind of decide whether or not we need to sunset or retire a course, and then, or how the utilization rates look for them. So we kind of talked through that as well. And then I've merged focus groups and unstructured interviews. We've done those as a qualitative study for international regions. That's where those actually kind of fit what we were trying to do, because we wanted to make sure our international regions got a voice, and that's kind of how we did those. So normally we have 3 people on that call, somebody's transcribing. So I got a chance to kind of go back and forth. I had to do this within like a 2-month period at one of my jobs. And we would ask a series of 4 questions within that hour to kind of get a feel for some of the things that we'll talk about later in this presentation. But this important step here, it actually feeds into everything else that we'll do to operate, to develop the DEI strategy, and to also operationalize it.
you kind of answered this question in your last comment. I was gonna ask, how long does it take to assess typically? This is it's very thorough, but it can take time, especially to analyze, which I'm sure is the next part, and implement. But about how long do you recommend?
So based on, if you want to do it right, I think, well, I'm not gonna say what I think. I'm gonna say from what I've seen, what I've experienced. Typically less than 6 months or less. If you're going beyond the 6 months, and then now you're just dragging it, and then people start losing hope. So the longer you do it, the less effective it is. They're like, okay, we took that survey back and so, and I still haven't seen any changes, because people get antsy. They want change to happen like overnight. So I would say 90 days is probably a good target. So 90 days, one of the larger organizations I was a part of, like the Air Force Personnel Center, our leadership, they were all close knit. We brought in third-party consultants to teach all the middle managers, first line supervisors, how to be change agents. And they were on a rotating schedule. And it was all face-to-face with, and we gamified it. And then they took like books. If you wanted to explore a little bit more, we push newsletters every 2 weeks, like a progress check. And we'll talk about that in here too. So we were all in. But not every organization is like that. And it's definitely something that we'll talk about next. Well, later in the presentation. But the next step is to develop a communication plan. So after you assess everything, these are some of the headers that I use on my communication plan. And it's usually just a PowerPoint, one-page PowerPoint document. And we just talk about like, what is the objective, the date that I need to talk to whoever my key stakeholders or my business partners. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But I identify my target audience, the channel in which I will communicate with them. So some people I would need to do a face-to-face, some people I need to email. It all depends on where they work. So, and then again, in international regions, I need to make sure that I have their key business partner or their key stakeholder lined up, and how I intend to communicate them, and what is my overarching goal. And that's something that we kickstart the conversation with. And then from there, what content, and what I mean by develop content is newsletters, flyers, presentations, like what is it that I need to communicate with that particular key stakeholder or business partner. And then after I develop my communication plan, then we organize the DEI working group. And this is where it gets a little interesting. So the DEI working group is essentially your design team. And I use the term design team loosely, not meaning that they create the content, but their ideas, their inputs, it becomes part of the curation process. And the top level executives, the diversity council members, from what I'm accustomed to, is the C-suite nominating those individuals. And then for DEI consultants, I've only been a part of, 2 large organizations where we had DEI consultants in-house, but typically that gets outsourced. So I did a lot of vendor management in the banking industry where we hired DEI consultants, again, for that unconscious bias, like how do you navigate around that? And then as far as the learning and development professionals, is pretty much everybody that's in the ATD Greater Atlanta, but our executive coaches, our project managers, our facilitators, instructional designers, it helps us mitigate blind spots. And then your HR professionals is typically your HRBP. That person helps with things that we might need, like your headcount reports or people operation guidance. They can see some things that will affect the end user that we may not. So, and then last but not least is the volunteer employees. Those come from like the employee resource groups most times, and they help us test whatever product or process that we're gonna embed into our DEI strategy or program, and they test it as the end user. And then from there, the DEI working group helps us develop those SMART goals. And I put an example of a SMART goal on the slide with the mnemonic SMART. So our specific goal for this particular scenario is to increase the leadership representation of women. I would put that one in there for what I've seen. Like for instance, the banking industry they have more females gender than males. But when you look at the leadership pipeline, it's mostly men. So there's hardly any women in the leadership pipeline. So this would be an example of what I put on the slides for how that would work using this mnemonic. So the way we would measure success is to track promotions and appointments. And I'll wait to finish my sentence until I get to the end. And then we'll also look to see is to show that it's achievable through developing a leadership pipeline and mentorship programs, in which I had the mentorship and sponsorship programs. And then it'll be relevant because it aligns with the organizational commitments to diversity. And then we want to see some improvement within 2 years. So if you're familiar with Kirkpatrick, that's that long-term measurement. So we kind of weave all that in there. And then from there, you want to measure success, because as that old adage goes, what you do not measure does not improve. So in a way that I look at these two categories, because I know some people use KPIs, some people use OPRs. I use grade school terms. So I refer to KPIs as the progress report. So if you got kids, you know what I'm talking about. And then OKRs is your report card. And then you'll see how it all comes together when I get to the last slide for this particular section. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep going. And then next, before we start wrapping up this first section, is you want to make sure that you have guiding principles. So from the data that we collected using the needs assessment from assessing the current state, we would use the working groups to help us come up with these guiding principles. And these are actually examples from the DEI strategic plans that I've worked on in the past. So this is what you would typically see as a guiding principle in the DEI strategic plan. Most people just look at their company values. They don't really pay attention to this part. So, and then the last slide for this section is to craft. Now you take all those pieces that we worked on that got us to this point, and we started putting it together. This is essentially what that table of contents would look like for your DEI strategic plan. And if time permits, I do have a snapshot of what an actual one looks like when I get to the end. Any questions? All right. So next we'll talk about operationalizing your DEI strategic plan. And we'll do that by talking about 4 tasks that I do as a DEI development lead to kind of operationalize my DEI strategy. And this is where I leverage what I learned in my military career to kind of help me navigate, because I know, like Josiah says, he got fire hose his first 2 days. And I learned real quickly that what I was accustomed to does not look like what I was walking into. So, but the way I got trained during my deployments and my military relocations, the higher you go, they expect you to reach back in that tool bag for those 5-week courses that you have and start creating what you need to build. I call it a 100-day plan. And I have cheat sheets for that in the appendix to kind of show you what that looks like. So these are just simple tools that I use to kind of help me operationalize this, that I leverage from my past experience. So when I say set up recurring tasks and meetings, that first task, I actually use this. I create this in PowerPoint. I call it a battle rhythm plan, but it's actually a template in PowerPoint. So if you want me to show you where that's at, just reach out to me. We can kind of walk through that. But I literally go into PowerPoint and I start mapping out. So I'm a journalist. So when people start talking to me and I'm new at a job, I write everything down. And they look at me like, are you really right? I'm like, yeah. So I paraphrase everything. I actually watched a lot of YouTube videos. I got trained on how to journal because you're on the clock 24/7, 365. So by the time I left at 22 years, I'll just say your fight or flight is so high, it's hard to bring it down. And I've been retired now for 3 years, and I still feel like that. And my colleagues would tell me that that feeling doesn't really go away. So I just use it to my advantage. So I had to learn to slow down when I got to financial services because I moved a little bit faster than something. They were like, hey, you're going to get us more at work, so you need to just slow down. So, and I'm used to, if I'm on a high energetic team, I kind of match that energy. And so with that, while I'm meeting people doing one-on-one coffee chats, I'm journaling, like, how do I need to program my tasks and my events? And this is how I start. And then once I build this in PowerPoint, I program it in Microsoft Outlook. So in Microsoft Outlook, you have the tasks and everybody uses the calendar, but I don't normally see people use the tasks. I actually set all that up in there, and then every week I refresh it. And then, or if I'm near a printer, I print it out and I use it to go with my, when I go to meetings. So if there's anything that I need to adjust, I make a note of it on my little Microsoft Outlook printout, and I do a forecast for the whole week. So when I used to meet with my boss, I would do a 2-week forecast with her. At the time, one of my favorite bosses. We still talk to this day. So when we would go to meetings, I usually sit next to her or behind her, depending on who's sitting at the table. And then we would talk about what we saw, our interaction. So that helped me adjust on the fly.
So this would be the DNI person's like list, not your list.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So your DEI portfolio, this is me doing a surface level programming, like what do I need to do that you're going to need from me? So I know we're going to have a workflow. We're going to have hot taskers that come down that we didn't plan for. So you need to build in time to work on that. So this is how I maximize my white space on my calendar. Because at some organizations, you're not going to have extra teams. Like at larger organizations, we do a lot of cross-functional teams. So we can kind of spread the work a little, but the smaller the organization, you're doing it.
Do you find that they're inclusive, like adding you into stuff as time goes on, like stuff that's not on your list, because they value like DNI now, so they're more inclusive?
I would say it depends on who you're talking to and the relationships that you build with them. So for me, the biggest thing is how do you build a relationship with them? So, and I see one of the things that I got trained on was conflict management and change management together. And so there's a box, if you Google change management model, there's 3 C's and 2 A's that you do with it. So I kind of use that same, it's like avoid, accommodate, compete. I forget the other 2 off the top of my head right now though, but there's a model and I use that model to kind of help me adapt to whoever it is that I'm talking to. And so part of my training was to make sure that I know my shortcomings first. So we always started with personality assessments in those 5-week courses. And I'm telling you the story so you can understand how I got to what you're asking me. And then from there, and then we can work on the interpersonal skills training. And that's where we start talking about you as a supervisor, you have a small team. How do you navigate around all the different personalities in the room once you know how you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and how you're going to compensate for that. And that's where the growth and development starts. And then from there, then we dig into the organizational diversity aspects, like the people across the entire organization, the processes that are intertwined, the technology that we're all using, and then the environment. So I have 4 areas that I'm focusing on, and they take that whole curriculum and dump it into that. So that's basically my lens that I'm looking through while I'm building all this. So when I go talk to someone and I need to get buy-in, my goal is to get to know that person first, establish rapport, and then find out whether their likes, dislikes. So we almost basically just do an icebreaker. And then I start nurturing that relationship. And then once I get them to start having confidence in me, and then they start talking to me about stuff that they normally wouldn't talk about with their coworker, then I start pushing, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? So, because they're part of my assessment process that we talked about on the first slide. Yeah. So to me, you have to build that. That's not something that's going to come natural. Yeah. And then the next thing, great question that you asked, that learner persona. So this is me with that team that we have that I mentioned earlier from what their current state. We use all that feedback that we collected to kind of help build these out. So that first box will be the individual contributor, the frontline employees. And we kind of look at what their roles are, like the call centers, branch banking. Just give you an example from the banking industry. Like branch banking doesn't have their computers. So again, back to what I mentioned about people, processes, technology, and environment. So they didn't teach me that, but that's me leveraging my leadership training experience for the team that I was on to help build out these learner personas before we actually curate training for the whole organization. So, and that came in handy before we started talking about the roles, the expected proficiencies, and their profiles. And then I wanted to highlight engagement needs and preferred learning styles and their preferred communication style, because that is shifting. So, especially with, we call it TikTok generation. Everybody wants information within 3 minutes. So a lot of the vendors that we talk to, we use these learner personas to kind of have that conversation. And so when we curate like micro learning training, these are some of the things that we had to keep in mind. Like, okay, if we did micro learning training, what do we need to keep you engaged? Because lectures isn't always the way to go. So we try to keep that to a minimum. And then from there, managers, we have, in the banking industry, we had a professionals category, and they basically were in the same category as the managers. So they were separate. So that if you look at them on the EEO report, that you'll talk to like the systems when we had them pull reports, and they will pull it based on the EEO job categories, the equal opportunity job categories. The professionals sometimes on that system is aligned with the manager roles. So as a DEI development lead, I was considered an officer in the system. So which is equivalent to being like a manager. So we had to create like a different profile for that. So we don't just put them in there as an individual contributor and we missed the mark on that. So we literally customized these learner personas. So when we created content, we got it as I'm not gonna say accurate, but it was more meaningful as much as possible. And from there, what I started doing was that I was accustomed to is I'm used to, this is what I meant by like, as I go, I have to create my own playbook. In the Air Force, we call it a continuity book. So in my playbook, all that journaling that I did, all that programming that I did, I actually built out a playbook. And I started doing that for the last 2 jobs that I had, was I would just go into Word and just craft up, basically it's like a quick reference guide, but I call it a playbook because it lists my entire portfolio. So I have a lot of Six Sigma training over the last 25 years. So I use that to my advantage. So at home, I'm that guy with that big wall Post-it notes and stickies, and I'll slap stuff up there and rearrange it until I get it to where I need it to go. So my buckets were the major programs that I had. Like if I had mentorship program, sponsorship program, these were sections by themselves in the playbook. And I would use the ADDIE model to kind of walk through it. So if I was training the person that was coming behind me, in which you're always going to do that, I already had a blueprint to do that. I didn't have to start from scratch and make them feel like I'm losing them, because I know what that feeling feels like too. So I try to keep it as simple as possible, but these are some of the things that was in my playbook. And I also had a list of POC, well, point of contacts. And so this list on the left is essentially everything that I had. We got somebody with a hand up.
Yes, I was wondering, can you describe the ADDIE model? I've never heard of that before.
The ADDIE model is like, it's a training model that typically you use to curate training, but I've seen people use it in the consultant space as well. So it's a mnemonic that stands for analyze, design, develop, implement, and execute. I mean, evaluate, I'm sorry. And if you go to the td.org website and you do a search for the 5D consulting model, you'll see how they changed it. They basically just changed the ADDIE model to a consultant model. It's the same thing. So
thank you very much.
You're welcome. So essentially it's a model, and you just basically use instruments to navigate around the model. So for instance, the A is analyze. So when you're analyzing things, we could use the examples that I had on the slides from assessing the current state, where you got surveys. Like these are things that you'll talk about with your planning team, like the people, basically your coworkers in the small group, before you start bringing in everyone, all the other subject matter experts. Yeah, but it's golden. That's one of the go-tos. And then I just listed some of the technologies, but not all the technologies that I've used in the past for curating content. But these are the ones that I knew off the top of my head that I use, and most of the web conferencing software that we use for webinars and to do virtual training, virtual instructor-led training. And then last but not least, this is one of the things that I've used in the past to communicate the status of my projects. So I just gave you an example on the slide, but what I did was we worked with IT. IT created at one of the companies I worked for, I won't disclose who that was, but they used SharePoint for us to use agile methodology. So we literally went through an agile introductory course to understand what agile is. And then in SharePoint, they created the functionality in SharePoint that would allow us to create a project, and then we can see where it's sitting, how many days it's been sitting, and where does it go to next. And then you can assign it to whoever you need to work on it, primary, alternate, point of contact. And this is as an example of what it looked like for one of my training strategy. I didn't list all of it on there because I didn't have enough room, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of how that looked. So for like the pipeline, which is an agile term, the title of that pipeline, it's a fancy way of saying project. What is the name of your project? So we start there, which is an initiative. And then the second phase is the backlog. The backlog is a fancy way of saying phases or steps. So for that one project, you might have different 5 phases. We'll say ADDIE. So if you wanted to do ADDIE, you wanted to ADDIE your training strategy, you would have 5 backlog items, which is analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And then you can set up the timer to start at a later date. So if you said, hey, we wanted to do this in 1 year, you can set it up that way in SharePoint that shows like, hey, for the first 3 letters of ADDIE, we need to accomplish these within the first 3 months. And in the last 60 days, 60 to 90 days, we'll evaluate the process. So you can set up SharePoint to do that. So we try to keep that automated. And then from there, the activities are the tasks associated with those. So again, with the ADDIE, what all do you need to do for the analyze phase? So all those items that I listed on the screen, that would be an activity. So there are tasks associated with those backlog items. I didn't lose anybody. Okay. All right. So I have 1 slide left. How am I doing on time? Okay. So these are some of the tips that I learned along the way. This is not all inclusive. There are a lot more that I can add to this slide, but I didn't want to go over time. And then if I had extra time, there are some illustrations that I wanted to show you to kind of give you an idea on some other things that I didn't get a chance to cover as I walked through what I'd done as a DEI development lead. But the first thing on my tips and best practice list is to get buy-in from senior leaders, which is what Nicole asked about earlier. So that is something that you definitely want to happen, because I've been in an organization where the senior leadership didn't buy into it, and that is pretty much dead on arrival. Like you're only gonna, and I think that organization had 10,000 people, and we kept seeing the same 200 people. Yep. And then when I did the mentorship program, let's just say the participants in the mentorship program were a reflection of their leadership. Yeah, it was disheartening. Yeah. And over time, the attrition rate starts to go up. So one of the things that I made was a metric of mine. It's not something I see the organization do. It's how to lower that attrition rate, because the lower the attrition, that attrition rate will tell you how happy your employees are. Because if they start going and it goes over 50%, you have a high turnover. Like something's wrong. Who's paying attention to that? Because you don't always get a replacement for the people that leave. So you have to deal with that. And if they didn't do a playbook, like how I'm nice enough to do that, now you got to start from scratch and you're lost. You don't know what meetings they went to, what tasks they did. It's going to hurt the manager more than the team itself. So now the manager's got to figure out how to pick up the slack from that one employee that decided to leave. So it's a ripple effect. And then from there, you want to diversify your go-to network. Every year I was at the Pentagon, they sent us to the Society of Human Resource Management SHRM conference. They host a DEI conference I want to say it's October every year. And it rotates to different places. I've been in San Francisco, I've been in Austin, Texas, and then I go to University of Minnesota conference. They call it Workplace Inclusion. I believe they paused it. So I believe it's on pause the last time I looked. But those conferences allowed me to like network with other people, and someone did a presentation on diversifying your go-to network, and I still have it if you want me to share the little brochure with you. But there's an assessment that you can take that shows you like how diverse your go-to network is, and it's on a point system. So you would rate like, what does the gender look like? What does the ethnicity look like? Again, this is something that I had learned already working with people from all different walks of life. Everybody has a strength to bring to the table, but you'll never get to what that strength is until you get to know the people that you're dealing with. So if you don't do team building activities, which is something that's part of that curriculum that we have, how will you ever get that? And how will you make people feel inclusive when you start? Daphne mentioned developing an inclusive environment. Like if you don't do team building, how are you going to create an inclusive environment? And the one thing that comes to mind immediately for me is team building. So I was taught team development concepts like forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjoining. So, and everybody gets stuck in a storming stage most times. but they won't work together to create new norms so that you can perform. And then eventually everybody leaves. Nobody stays in that same job forever. So you start focusing on the minute stuff and focus more on the big picture stuff that you could do together. Like, and then you celebrate your wins. So total rewards comes in there. How do we celebrate our wins? And then from there, you want to invest in yourself. I don't wait for organizations to say, hey, we're going to send you X, Y, and Z. So I would not hesitate to pay out of pocket for something that I know is going to benefit me long-term, because it's all about my individual development plan. And I don't want to get complacent as a lifelong learner. So I'll spend the money. But some of the things I listed on here as examples is SHRM, HRCI. I didn't list the coaching and project management because I was going to run out of room. But those items too, certification programs for DEI is fairly new. What I would recommend you do for that is talk to people who have obtained a DEI certification to make sure that what you're planning to do is going to be sufficient for you. Because one certification I had looked into, when I talked to someone who done it, it was like, don't do it. Because the organization that certified them was falling apart and they deviated away from their values. So you don't want to pay $5,000 for a certification. They didn't pay for it though, but you don't want to pay $5,000 for a certification and then the organization loses their accreditation. Now, when you put that on a resume, it's like, so what? Yeah. And then from there, you want to stay informed, and the best way to stay informed is to stay plugged in. As I said, the new member orientation, be active in your membership, courtesy of one of our counterparts in the membership team. That didn't come from me, so I'm just borrowing it. But stay active in your membership, go to conferences. If you're networking with people, info share what type of books you're reading. Some of the concepts in this slide, I actually pulled from a book that I'm reading called Design Thinking for Training and Development Professionals. So I actually used some of the concepts in the slide. So if you like the slide, that's where I got it from. And then you want to go to those roundtable discussions, subscribe to like websites on or companies on LinkedIn that do what it is that you're trying to do as part of your individual development plan. So subscribe to them. I get a lot of feeds every day. I just catalog it. And then I use that folder for resource guide later. So I just go in there and do a search for, I know they talked about this. And then I'll just piece it together that way. So I don't really delete anything. I just archive it and catalog it.
And you do that on LinkedIn, you said?
No, in my email.
Oh.
In my email.
Okay.
Yeah. No, in LinkedIn, I'm probably following so many people.
I was gonna say, I need to learn that trick for LinkedIn.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I'm always clicking save, and then I gotta remember to go back. Right.
Yes. And then most importantly, network. I can't stress that enough. And I just listed examples there. So network mixers is general because sometimes I'll go to one event and then someone will say, hey, have you heard about X, Y, and Z? Which is how I met ATD Greater Atlanta. I was at a COP Chamber event, which is not even listed on the slide. And that's how I knew about ATD Greater Atlanta through an executive coach. And she's not even a member, but she heard about ATD Greater Atlanta. And I make sure she knows what I'm doing and when I'm enjoying myself, because it's always enjoyable when I come to any ATD Greater Atlanta event. But she knows. Yeah. But with that, that is the end of my presentation. And if I have time, do I have time? Okay. So I did throw some extra slides in there. Yes.
I just have a couple questions.
Okay.
Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the DEI Hub.
Yes.
What is that?
It's a Slack channel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the best way to anyone can join, the best way to join it though is to Google DEI Hub, and then you'll go to their website and then you'll subscribe. They don't have a website.
Okay.
So you literally have to join the Slack channel. They'll feed you like the observance. So in the military, we don't have affinity groups. We have observance months. So there's out of the 12 months out of the year, different ethnicities get a month. It's part of the equal opportunity program.
Oh, okay.
So, and then we have professional development, professional and private orgs that kind of do what the employee resource groups do in the private sector, but they're tiered. So all the individual contributors, they have a private org, the middle managers have a private org, and then the senior leaders have a private org. And then when you make it to the pinnacle, like where I promoted it, we have our own org. And each org is responsible for mentoring the organization below it. So it's like, again, we have our succession planning model, again, it's second to none. And I see how what you see the consultants do is essentially how I got trained. But they're making money off of it because the organizations that I've seen in the private sector focus more on revenue versus the people. And our motto was mission first, but people always.
Question I had, I was curious, you said you live in Japan?
Yes, 3 years.
I think that's probably the most monocultural country across the US. What was your experience like there?
Very family oriented and nothing I had imagined when I got there. So I have a family of 5, but at the time I had a family of 4. And my kids were maybe 2 and 3. They were all on diapers, let's just say that. So imagine going to Japan, and we have a sponsor. And then I ended up being in charge of the sponsorship program when I got to the Air Force Personnel Center. So in layman's terms, that's a buddy program. So not every organization has that, but the Air Force made it mandatory. So every time you move, someone from your new organization is supposed to reach out to you and tell you where to live, how the culture is. And then we have computer-based training, which is the e-learning course. We just use the term CBTs. You'll take a course. They're going to tell you like the common language, like Ohio gozaimasu, good morning, konnichiwa, everybody knows konnichiwa. And then the customs, like things you're not supposed to do in public when you're there, like spit. Everybody likes spit. You can't just do that anywhere. But when we got to Narita, there's 2 airports in Tokyo, and that's a long flight. I think it took 23 hours to get there. Yeah, the longest flight ever. And then so we went to Narita, and then you got to take a bus to Haneda, which is probably 30 minutes away. And that part, my sponsor didn't tell, my sponsor dropped the ball. So my sponsor didn't coach me on what I needed to do to travel. They were just going to take care of me when I got there. Because the expectation from some people is that if this isn't your first assignment, that you should understand what to do, biases. So, but I got a chance to correct that when I got there. So, so you have to, once you get to Narita, then you have to get yen. Now keep in mind, I'm telling you this story from 2002. This is 2002. You have to go to an ATM machine, get yen. I don't understand the exchange rate. And our money is like probably 2 times the amount of what you're pulling out of the machine, and then get back. Then I got to find out where is this bus that I'm supposed to get on. So, but the Japanese nationals, they're very observant. So when I say friendly, you probably won't see that type of friendliness in the States. But they actually looked at us like, hey, they got that lost look. We got some more veterans over here. So like they kind of motion to you because you probably won't understand the language. And then they just kind of push us. So you kind of go with the flow. Because my wife and I, we had both deployed. She was prior military too. So we've deployed enough to know like when the local national is trying to help you versus manipulate you. So they actually just pushed us to where we need to go. And then we have bags. So when you relocate, you have your regular bags, and then you have a mobility bag. And that's just stuff you just look like, yeah. It gets chaotic going through an airport. But then when we got to Haneda, when they take off, they take off. So like if you have a weak stomach, when the Japanese, JAL is the name of their airline, when it takes off, they hurry up and get to wherever altitude they need to, and then they level up. They don't ease into it, they get into it. Yeah. Yeah. And so that plane ride was an hour, and when we landed, it snowed. And when it snows in Japan, they have snow festivals. And then they have black ice. I'll just say I gained 25 pounds there. The food is good. You get a cost of living allowance because the money you make in the military is below the majority of the people in the military. You're making below what the average American makes. So I think right now it's like 60,000. You're probably I was making half of that with a family of 4. So I don't even think I was at 30,000 when I went. So they give you a cost of living allowance to kind of bump you up. And then we lived on base in apartment buildings, and they call them towers. So the Japanese build their apartments on rollers because they get earthquakes a lot. So I don't think I had just missed that big tsunami that happened that wiped out like 200,000 people. Yeah. So those plates, when they get stuck, the tectonic plates, I believe is what it's called, it causes a tsunami. And that's one of the briefings, like we get an orientation briefing, which is different than when I walked into the private sector, because my expectation was here. And my wife left the Air Force in 2008, and she loves to say, "I told you, I tried to tell you." So when we went to our orientation briefing, everything's structured, like your onboarding program, every time you move, it's actually 24 months. So the first month, it's like you're going to briefings, you're meeting all your point of contacts that I have on the slide. Again, I had to use what I learned to just recreate it. When you go there, they'll say, don't swim in the ocean, stay away from the ocean, because the draft will take you under. And sure enough, somebody will go out there at any given time and try it. And I think there was a jet that went down. They could get the person, but they could never get that jet because the current was too strong. Yeah, so, and you can see it when you go to the coast. But the food was good. If you like seafood, it's fresh. I've been to the fish markets where you had to learn not to walk close to the table, because at their fish market, everything is alive and it's just, it's literally just on the table. Yeah, it's like a whole, if you've never been, it's worth going. If you like the noodle soup, like the food is nothing compared to what I've had. And I have yet to have that type of food that I had there. And it's small portions. My favorite restaurant was Vikings. Vikings is similar to like an hibachi grill, but it's at your table. So if you have a family of 4, you all sit at one table like in a booth, and then you pay for your food, you pay for your meal when you walk in, and then it's like a meat market. So you just take your plate and you pick whatever raw meat you want to cook in front of you and grab your season, and you cook it, you sit down and cook it yourself. Yeah. So there's no wasting food, you already paid for it. But just to give you an idea of what it's like, then when it snowed, I purchased automatic starters. I learned the hard way. I didn't do it when my friends told me to do it, because when it snows, it could dump. You can go to bed and come out in the morning, and that snow is like this on the car. And then you have to warm it up. And if you're going to be late for work if you didn't do it beforehand. And before the Air Force started outsourcing, well, the military in general, outsourcing civil engineer support, I had to go to work 2 hours before we start seeing customers. So if we start seeing customers at 7:30, I had to be there like at 6, maybe 6:30. And I had a crew of us would take sledgehammers and this supplement that we use to put on the ground to melt the salt. I forget what it's called. So that customers don't fall when they come in the building. Yeah. So we had to prep for all that, not just get online and warm up your computer and then prepare everything. No, you got to come prepare the walkway. You got to shovel it. We had snow blowers. Like the work that I did, again, that's why I was saying I was doing that type of work for 20 years. And then you walk into the private sector, like, oh, this is all your job. And I'm like, that's it. But I can't say that.
Yeah.
And then I had to learn to slow down. So, because I was moving too fast for some of the people that I work with. Yes, sir.
I know Lakeisha had a hand up as well. So
yes.
Lakeisha.
Oh, thanks, Josiah. Tony, I want to say this has been a fantastic presentation. You have been absolutely phenomenal. Earlier, you mentioned that you mentioned 100-day game plan, and I was just curious to see if you had a visual on your slide, because I knew you did. There you go.
So for everything I mentioned in my stories, there's a slide for it. I didn't know how much time I had, but I put it in there anyway.
And we'll share
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to reach out to you and talk more about this.
Yes. So, and while you're at it, Lakeisha, great question. If you Google KPMG onboarding, you will see how they do it. It's close to what I'm accustomed to. And I still kept, the Air Force guidance is not, how you call it, it's not, what do you call it?
So, is it comprehensive or?
Well, it's public knowledge. So you can go online and pull it down. Yes. So it's not confidential information where, like financial services, I can't share any of their content, but the Air Force, you can go to EPUBs, and I'm just telling you, epubs.af.mil, and I can download any Air Force guidance and use it as a baseline. So, but some of the guidance that I worked on, it was discontinued. So, but I still have the originals because it was my program. So I can tell you what we would do for individuals for 24 months until you've been with the organization for over 8 years. At that point, you're considered like a craftsman at your craft. So that old adage, the student becomes a teacher. So you have to teach what you learn, and it's part of your performance appraisal. Like, how are you developing the next generation of leaders? And this is important to that step. So within the first few days, Lakeisha, to answer your question, as a leader, I had to do an icebreaker when I first show up. So that was one of the things that I would do. I have slides, I call them icebreaker slides. And I went through a Gettysburg leadership course, and some of the 4 things that I made sure was on that slide was about me. So I had pictures of my family, where I've been, everything that Josiah asked me to introduce at the beginning about myself. And I kept it short. My spiel was 10 minutes or less. And then what do you expect, what to expect from me, what I expect from you, and then what are my hot buttons? Those are the 4 areas that I talked about in my PowerPoint presentation. So that way, if people veer left, they understood why I did what I would do if you went left. But I wasn't a hard ass, but I wanted them to understand what my expectations was, and that I love to pay it forward, so you would understand why I did certain things the way that I did. And then the first 30 days, I do what we call a windshield tour. So we're going to take you, introduce you to everybody you're going to be working with, and any facilities that you're going to be spending your time at. So, and then we had a vehicle for that belonged to the organization. So you're not driving your vehicle around all these different places. So courtesy of the government, they're paying for your gas. So my last job, we had 9 line of businesses, and we call it cradle to grave services. So we had daycare, we had a daycare on base, and then we had child care, child development center. And then some organizations, some bases we have schools. It just depends on your population. So we have that. And then we have dining facilities, we have restaurants, we're in charge of all that. So what I was accustomed to in HR is equivalent to hospitality and management and HR. So we merged the 2 functions together. So I had that, then I had mortuary affairs, which, like, if someone died, we have that process too. So we're the ones that, and honor guard, so we're the one that gives you your last right. Hence why I say we have cradle to the grave services. We literally had everything you would do in hospitality management and HR. And we also had lodging, which is a fancy way of saying hotel. So like when COVID kicked off, we were part of working with FEMA. I think when it first kicked off, there was a cruise ship. That cruise ship was supposed to come to Warner Robins, Georgia. So we quarantined people that deployed when we started ramping up for Ukraine and Russia. They were going to Latvia. So we were talking about that 2 years before we saw that on the news. We knew that was coming. But to get people out of country to Latvia through lodging and middle of COVID, that's where we quarantined them. So those type of services. So I had a lot of emergency management. I don't have all these certifications, but we go through the motions. So hence why, like when I left, I didn't know where to start because I've done so much. I could just package it up and go from there. But then after the next 30, not to get off topic, but after the next 30 days, now I started getting immersed into like the day-to-day operations. And what my mentors taught me, because there's a lot of unwritten rules, don't touch anything, don't offer to change anything, don't suggest anything until after you've been there for 30 days. So after that first 30 days, it's game on. And I'd be like, hey, why do we do, I use critical thinking at that point. Why do you do this? And most of the times people do it just because they've always done it that way. And so what I would do in my role as a senior advisor is I curate professional development training. So I would literally, and I do 4 corners. I keep it simple where it's role plays or they work in projects in 4 corners. So I had the easels with the wall post-it notes on there. And then I would lecture them on the rules like we play Monopoly. All right, here's what we're going to do. This is why we're doing this. And one of the training I did was tour guide versus travel agent leadership. So we basically talked about what it's like when you're a hands-off leader versus when you're hands-on. And because of the culture that we have, especially with suicide rates and then people losing some of these deployments actually break people. Because I've seen some people that never recovered from these hot spots. So because of the nature of what we do, you have to really know when that person is not themselves. And if they make any sudden judgments that doesn't coincide with like what they're supposed to be doing. So if they make a sudden judgment, like all of a sudden they're happy, but they're not always happy, they might have a plan. You don't know what people are dealing with at home. I've had to send people back when I was in Afghanistan. I had a small team of 9. And by the time I left, we had 7 people because I had to send 2 back home. Some people's parents were in hospice, so I had to send one guy home because his dad was placed in hospice. One lady had also so bad that she just couldn't come to work. Like she got hospitalized there, so we had to send her back. And then I don't get a replacement for them once you get within like 45 days of the next rotation. So we had to, and we're working 24-hour shifts, and we service people across 2 countries. Yeah. So we started talking about doing more with less. I get it. I get it. And my population that I serviced was 3,500 people. Yeah.
So did you go through specific mental health training to deal with those issues?
It's part of every leadership training you go through. It's embedded in the curriculum. And then before you go, we have this thing called the processor line. So in the processor line, before you leave, it's like going to doing your annual physical. So everything you know you're supposed to be doing when you go to the doctor once a year, we kind of do it before you deploy. We got legal there. We're talking about your will and testament, powers of attorneys. They plan as if you're not coming back. You have a chaplain there. If you're religious, they're there. So they give out Bibles. They're going to talk to you about whatever it is that you want to deal with. Again, they accommodate pretty much everybody. They do dog tags in case if you go to like Afghanistan or Iraq, where if you deploy with a weapon, you need to make sure you got your dog tags because you don't know what you're probably going to deal with over there. But dog tags, food, they feed you while you're in there because you're in a briefing all day. And it's a 1-day event, usually depending on how many people have to go through there, it could be like an hour or longer, whatnot. And then they do what we call bag drag. So we literally inspect people's bags to make sure you brought what we told you to bring, because there's a checklist for that. Yes.
I was going to say, real quick, from a time check perspective, I know we're coming up on time. But
okay.
I do want to give a call out. We'll have all of these slides,
yes.
if you're okay with it,
yes.
available to share via degree, so everyone will have access to it following this meeting. So if we could give Tony a round of applause. He was extremely helpful and certainly me drinking from the fire hose. This is probably the best thing I got in addition to everything else you shared. So thank you, sir. So y'all free to please take some sandwiches with you if you like. But otherwise, we appreciate you coming out. I know the next event we got coming up is a COP next week. The 20th. So next Thursday is virtual. We'd love to have you join us for COP. Community of practice.
Yes, community of practice, and it's how to put together a learning assessment.
It is.
Okay.